David Campbell. I'm retired Omaha Police Department.
How old were you on May 6, 1975?
I believe I was about 23 at the time. I had just come off of probation. I was on a little more than a year. And should I begin? And seemed like an uneventful day when I went to work. The sky was clear and everything else, and there was rumblings on the air that the weather was unstable, and back then they didn't have the technology that they have today. And what we were getting, the spotters, there was react spotting, and the Omaha Fire and Omaha Police were asked to keep an eye out for things going on. A call come out, I got sent down to 480 in Martha to check for a twister. That's how it came out. And I went down there, and then I got another call. There was a jackknife semi because of the twister. After I got down there, I could see a twister up in the sky going over to Council Bluffs, but I could never find the semi that was supposed to be jackknifed. So I hit back in service, and I turned around and I got on I-80 and started going westbound. Some of the cars were yelling, I just come across some damage out Wentworth, areas like that. But they didn't know really what it was. And the calls start coming in the 911, and dispatch advised that there's possibly report of tornado, but we can't confirm it. And then they start blowing the sirens, because all it takes is a spotter or whatever back then, the confirmer, policeman or whatever, to do that to alert people. They still couldn't find what it was, and when I come up over the hill and I'm headed toward 72nd Street and I-80, 911 dispatch is still asking, does anybody see anything? And I look, and here's this massive tornado crossing the interstate right in front of me when I come over the hill. So we didn't have regular radios in our cruisers back then, so I couldn't hear what the weather was going on other than what was coming across the 911. I looked in the rearview mirror, and everybody, the faster I go toward the tornado, the faster everybody's right behind me. And I'm thinking, I hope they see this thing and don't quit following me, and they wouldn't. So I start going across like this through the lanes of traffic to get them to slow down. I had the lights and stuff going, and I told dispatch, I said, it's right by the Howard Johnsons now, in that vicinity, and it seems to be going northbound. And I told the radio that I got all the cars stopped on the interstate. And now the other cruiser officers are starting to call in. We're up at Wentworth, there's damage here and there's damage there. What is this? They're still asking. And I again got on there and I says, now it's completely across the interstate. And radio start, when I say radio, I'm talking about 911. They said, can you keep giving the location of this? Because there's no way to track this thing. And I said clear, and I got off the interstate, and I'm watching where it's headed. It's more into this area here, the Westgate area, but it's so massive that when it's going by the downtowner, I'm just seeing the storm on the west side of it, and I'm on the east side of it. And it was kind of not looking like what it really was, because I can see roofs and things going, but it's still trying to work its way up, because it tried to go like, I think 96 and Q, and then Wentworth. It tried to get some steam there, and that's when I heard that somebody had taken a picture of a clip about 8 seconds of like 4 tornadoes, 5 tornadoes that turned into this big one. So I stayed with it, and I'm still given the location, and I decide I'm starting to see cars and stuff flying around. And they don't look like cars, but they were. And the roofs of houses, and then the explosion when a house blows up. Then all that stuff's flying around. And I got thinking, all the Omaha police and Omaha firemen, they're working right now. They're going to jump into action right away, not knowing where this thing's going. And that possibly could, some of them could get killed. And I remembered that we used to have scanners. Everybody had a scanner, a police scanner, and it had the calls on there. They were listening to that. People were listening to it. Later on, I had policemen tell me, hey, we heard you on the scanner. We were cooking food and we ran the basement and then our house blew away. So I figured, well, maybe somebody could do something with the scanner. And a couple of news channels, I'm not sure which ones, they turned the police scanner on live on TV, and they were playing because the location's going. So I figured I better stay with this as long as I can and give the location where it's at. So I get down to Center Street, and then Bergen Mercy gets hit. And it took the cars in the car lot, or in the parking lot back there, and it swirled them up into a pyramid. Now I understand what I'm up against. So I give the location. I told them at Bergen Mercy, I says, once this clears out of here, you can send the help in. And the fire and the police are standing by. Everybody's taking cover, but once they get the location where it's at, then they come in behind, and they're there right now. So that was working how I wanted it to. So I knew Exarban was still open, and I'm coming down the hill, and everything is mostly on the west side of 72nd, headed up Pacific, and I see that it hit a lot of the business up in there, and that's where the first girl was killed. And I saw that the Exarban was going to be okay. So we cleared that, and I stopped for a minute at 72nd Pacific to see where this was actually going to go. And it got all dark around me, so now it's starting to go east of 72nd. It's coming. And I looked out at the street, and the curbs disappeared because the water's coming down so hard. And I can hear this wasn't the train noise. This was a jet engine noise. I was in the service around jets. And it just roaring, making your ears pop. And then a Carmen Ghia comes sailing by me, end over end. So I pulled up there, and nobody was in it. And I said, I better keep on moving, but I can't tell where I'm at. Because if these cars are coming down like this, you get one on top, the roof, and that was going to be it. So I'm looking, and it's getting darker and darker and darker. And there was a restaurant on 72nd Pacific, just to the north, had a big cow head for the sign out in front. And a transformer exploded. And it sent all this green flame and electricity everywhere and lit everything up, and I could see this cow head up there. So I knew where I was at. I knew that Dodge Street was next. And continued on. And
So at that point, were you going north on 72nd?
I was north.
And where was the tornado around you?
The tornado from Pacific, it went across. There's a bridge just before it gets to Dodge, before it gets to Nebraska Furniture Mart. And all the mail trucks, there was a mail office there, and swirled them out in a big pile, and they were crashing down in the creek and everything else. And I didn't know it, but there's policemen down in the creek taking cover with other people, and they told me later on. So I continued north. Tornado tore up Nebraska Furniture Mart. I noticed by the time that I got to Dodge that the tornado is mostly pulled over and it's east of 72nd now. And I noticed there's no traffic. So I got the feeling that, hey, people are hearing this. And then the downtowner there exploded, flattened the whole complex that was up in there. And it just kept tearing back and forth, back and forth. And then there's a church at 72nd and Western. And I looked up and I could see the steeple, and then the steeple was gone. And then when the tornado moved further, I saw the steeple and the cross bent, but it was still there. So I figured, well, the direction it's going now, it's headed toward Lewis and Clark. And I'm thinking about the times. I sure hope that the kids aren't doing extra things and they're still in the school. So I going up along 72nd by Lewis and Clark, and the building was a lot of glass, lots of glass in that school. And it just was like a great big pop explosion and everything. It looked like water blowing out all the windows. So I get toward the top of the hill, and it's really tearing up the residential area there. Now it's starting to lock, 72nd Western is starting to lock in on both sides of the street. And I'm getting things hitting my cruiser on one side, and then all of a sudden I'm getting hit from the other side. And I couldn't figure out at the time what was going on. Later on I found out the tornado was doing a 360. So I'm alongside of it, and it comes around and it's gonna nail me on the other side, and that's when I really got nailed with stuff.
You were inside it.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And it's raining so hard that I had to open the door to let the water out. And the winds and the pressure changes, and I'm trying to still talk on the radio, but sometimes I'm not really hearing everything because of this jet engine roaring and my ears popping. I suppose from the pressure changes. About that time when I'm getting nailed, an elderly lady, she was up in her room of her house, and they say that she probably didn't even hear that this was coming, and the back of her house was sliced off, and that's where she was killed. So my tires are still up on the cruiser. I got to back up and get the wires off because they're electric wires. Some of them are smoking, some of them are on fire. The telephone poles in that area back then were really huge ones, and they were snapping off. And they were, every time you hear one, everything would shake. And I worked my way around that. The car still worked. The light bar was damaged. The siren was ripped partially off. The back window, it was all over in the car. It was all in my clothes. I didn't get a scratch. And I continued on. That tornado wasn't going to give up. The dispatch is still asking what the locations are. Sometimes I volunteer it, sometimes I answer their question. Chief of Police ordered 911 to tell me to use caution about that time. I was getting towards 72nd Maple. And I'm thinking that was nice of him. How do you use caution? So it's 72nd and Blondo. The wind's blowing so hard, trying to adjust back, it wants to go east and north again. And there's a huge baker sign with poles like this. And it just bent over like butter. It just right over. And the whole front of the store, the store employees got everybody in the back. Some of this I find out later on. Got them into the back just when the front of the building exploded. Sliced it right off. So the continue back and forth and the damage, and it still won't give up. Get 72nd Maple. It started to go east now, and it really hit hard around 69th and Maple. A guy was curious in the gas station there, and he got up top the building, and he got a 2x4 through him just before the building got collapsed. So he was number 3. So the tornado now is slowly going east through Benson, still going north, headed toward Benson Park. I'm still giving the location. It seemed like it started to get a little bit distance from me now, and I'm starting to see the shape of it again. So if I was close, you can't see anything in it, and if you're far enough away, you'll get different lights will come through, and if you're looking to the west, you'll see like a green haze above all the black, and plus the debris. There wasn't as much debris coming down, but it was still tearing the houses up. There was a policeman that lived on 69th and Pinckney, Emmett up in there. He was out sitting on his chair watching, and he had his scanner going. He grabbed the kids, went down, and his whole house disappeared. They never did find it. They rebuilt, but he left. But they got down, he was listening to that police scanner. The public, you could buy them, the police buy them, firemen. And the thing's still not over with, but now I'm hearing this car now is going in this area, and we're going here, and the fire department here and there, and there was a fire captain. He had got on there, and he was driving through all this, giving locations too, so that the fire department, but they're on a different channel. Captain Rockwell was his name. And I get down by Benson Park, and I notice the parts and the pieces and stuff, it's getting smaller and smaller, and I'm trying to look around, and where is this thing? Am I going to be surprised by it again? And I look up, and I can start to see it, the bottom of the tornado going up, the tail. And it was right over Benson Park, but just before it started to go up, took all the fence, all the cyclone fence, and it rolled it right up, just rolled it up, tore it loose. And I could see it was going up, and was trying to come down again, going up, coming down, and there's stuff still coming out. And then I realized it looks like it's gone, and I said, car 360, I said, I'm at Benson Park, and the tornado is dissipating. Now I'm thinking, where do I need to go back? Because it's still chaos out there. You only got so many police cars, fire cars. They're calling people in. The National Guard was going to get called in, and they had a headquarters there. And so I figured I'm going to go back to Bergen Mercy, because that's the biggest, hardest hit cars, swirled up, damage. And I'm trying to think, how are they working on people in emergency rooms and things like this? I learned later what they all did. And I went back there, and I figured that part of the action was over, and I get down to 72nd Mercy, and I pull up to about 73rd, and the cars are everywhere with people bleeding, just loading them up, trucks and everything else. And everybody's taking their turn trying to get in there. And I'm still listening to radio, and everybody's setting up and doing their thing, and no policeman, no fireman got hurt, because I would have heard about it. We didn't know about the deaths until later on. And I know how people are during disasters, how it pulls them together. So I knew this was going to be all right, but we got to get past this night. So here come a van through the cemetery, right by Bergen Mercy. And it's full of people bleeding, arms out the windows bleeding. He just picked people up, and he's going to come through, and he's inside there, and the gate's locked. And he's asking, how do I get these people through? But there's no way he's going to get that, go all the way out with that van again and then come back. I said, do you have a chain? Do you have anything? And a guy in a 55 Ford, really nice pickup truck, red. He pulls up. I asked him, I said, you got a chain or anything? Maybe some bolt cutters. And he said, no. But he said, you want me to open the gate? I said, go ahead. He put his vehicle up against the gate. He floored it, burning the tires, and he pushed on it until it ripped the gate off. Got the people up. They got up to the emergency room in the van, and they're still coming. I looked around to tell the guy thanks, and he was gone. So then I stood out my cruiser and I said, I'll calm down here. I'll direct some traffic. And then the guy with a camera came up and he says, can I take your picture? Are you 360? And he took it, and that's the only picture of me in the tornado from that day. And we worked long nights. This went on almost 2 weeks. Luckily, the governor and the mayor were in town, and the National Guard were activated right away. Really needed those guys so we could do our thing.
You worked 18-hour?
12 to 18-hour days.
Can we go back to, there's so many questions, but I'm curious how you felt after that tornado picked up and now you're driving back down 72nd after that horrendous 30 minutes and what you saw and how you felt.
You know, one part of me is catching all this from a different, before I'm seeing it in a storm, and now it's clear and I can see, and it's people were everywhere helping. They were helping the policemen do their work. They were helping the fire department do their work. Everybody jumped into action. That made me feel good, but I still wasn't calmed down yet from all this. And I told dispatch radio that I'm going to be headed back to go down to Bergen Mercy, and I'm thinking, everybody is where they need to be. They've got their own radio, they're getting help, and it's going to be slow. But I said, I hope this, from what I saw, isn't, there's going to be a massive amount of people killed. A lot of people hurt. This wasn't my first bad storm I ever saw. I was in the Vietnam War, and just toward the end of the war, the ceasefire was to come. We ended up in a typhoon, cyclone, they call them over there, for 3 days. Constant heavy winds and things like that. And here we have in Omaha, Nebraska, a tornado on the ground for 30 minutes with winds over 200 miles an hour. So going into this and go down and try to complete this, my assignment, there was no fear at that point about what was going on because of my experience before. But in the back of my head, I got to keep praying to get me through this thing. What do you call it? To give you the strength. Still, there was no fear. It was but it makes you really anxious. You're on high alert, your body, and you just can't wind. I couldn't wind down the whole day. And you're sitting there and you're going over and over and over. I mean, you got to keep paying attention to what's happening around you, but all night long, this and that, and could you done anything better? And that's kind of what went through my mind.
Do you hear from anybody immediately or in the years after, Dave, about them listening to you on a radio or getting the information that you were providing back to the Weather Service?
Close to me, my family heard me on the scanner, and my grandmother couldn't see, and she's very old, and she was by herself. They heard what was coming, and they got her down in her storm cellar because of that. That's a starter. And then the policemen telling their stories all the time about who they saved and what they lost, and they lost the house. And I tell them, I feel for you, whatever you need when we're on our own time to help each other out. The American Legion, the VFW, they found out I was a war veteran. They come forth and did things, and I got the National Weather Service gave me an award, and every once in a while something would pop up and they would give it to me, and then somebody would want to talk about it, and then I start saving a scrapbook, and what is it now, 47 years later, and I'm still talking about it because I'm sitting here.